Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over how to query in-house sign documents using an automation, right? So basically programmatically querying in-house sign documents. So obviously in-house sign or in-house cloud comes with the in-house sign module that has an amazing user interface that you can basically use to, manage your documents and everything. But you might have a use case in your application that requires you to perhaps have all your documents, right? For maybe a certain kind of use case or whatever the case may be, right? And you would like to query these documents. Maybe you don't want to store it in your database. Maybe you want to always query it in real time. Although I think that having it in your database will be faster, but you can always query it in real time from the in-house cloud platform. We're going to go over that today. We're going to be doing our testing using an API called Inhouse Sign Test. We currently have in previous video series uh, gone over how to create, send, get documents, get file, cancel, and delete programmatically. And in this video, we're going to go over how to query, right? So basically get a list of your documents. So all automations are written within functions, right? So we're going to call our function query in-house sign test. And this is just going to say query in-house sign documents. Create this workflow, create this function rather. I'll give it a workflow called logic. And then we are going to add a step. And I'm just going to type in sign. So as you can see here, we have one function called get in-house sign documents. I'm going to click on that. And then it's going to give me this nice long function. We're going to go over it. So we're going to call this docs. So here's the deal. We give full flexibility into querying documents. You can provide document ID if you wanted to query one. If you wanted to query based on perhaps the name, you can provide the name. And as it says here, you can basically use a partial name. So you can have like an autocomplete type logic where you can just type in a few words or a few characters, and it will pull in documents with matching names. If this was part of a project, you could type in or query with your project ID. So if you had an application that you have maybe different projects, whatever you wanted to have that interface within your app, you can do that as well. If you wanted to query, documents based on their status, right? Is the document in the draft? Is it canceled? Is it declined? You know what I mean? You have the ability to basically query based on status. This could be hard-coded or this could be done programmatically. You could basically query based on the sender, right? The sender's email, the recipient's email. You could query based on a time range, so the created from, the created to, or the timestamps, the updated at, You could sort based on the document's name. You could sort by status. You could sort by the created date. You could sort by the update dates. And then you could also do some basic pagination, like saying skip or limit, okay? And of course, we need that API key for access. All right, so we are going to just not really put in any of these options. We're just going to add the API key. So we're going to say system user. We're going to select a system user called Danny Joe. It's going to call this API underscore key. So in-house sign automations require an authenticated user, and our API that we're going to use to test is exposed to the public. So, we're going to use our system user here called Danny Joe that has in-house sign developer access. This just means that this user can do all things that an admin can do in in-house sign module in a non-prod environment. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my function. I'm going to just rearrange the steps. Okay, and I'm going to reference that API key over here. So in order to not have a massive response, I am going to just hard code a completed filter, and I'm just gonna limit this to 5. This can be done programmatically, right? Using a parameter, or this can be done by, just hard coding this. Okay, I think that's it. And then finally, we're just gonna return the response. And I think we call the variable docs. So this is gonna return basically an array of documents. If you wanted, let's say, to be more organized, let's say this was going to be like an API, proper API, you could probably just do something like this, switch the code, and let's say results, or maybe documents, and then have the variable docs, right? That's probably, much cleaner. You're going to go ahead and save this, deploy. We're going to go into our API, create an endpoint. We're going to call this endpoint query. Now, ideally, this is going to be a push request, even though we don't have any parameter that we're passing in, because we can pass in a bunch of parameters. I just choose not to in this demo. But there is no limits to how you can mix and match it based on what we have here. I might play around with it in a second, but for now, we're not going to pass anything in. We have created our endpoints called query is going to be a post request. So query, we're going to connect our function called query Inhouz sign test. We're going to select this. Okay. And then we are going to save, and we are going to deploy to the development environment. I'm going to go ahead and copy that query URL in the dev environment. Open up Postman. It's going to be a post request. HTTPS. Paste that in there. Switch is going to be JSON. We don't have anything here. We're just going to post. We're going to get probably a large sized response. So actually the system already breaks it down into the total document and results. So I did not need to wrap it up. But here we have 17 documents, and we return, the documents data, basically all the relevant data that are in those documents. And be careful with this because this might be a very large request. So just be careful with it. Obviously, we can experiment with partial filters. So let me go ahead and just copy the partial text. We're going to go in here and we're going to just say documents name, and we're going to paste that in there. Before this is not going to work, by the way, I have to go back into my function. Okay. And I'm going to have to map the document's name to our request body. So it's going to say parameter dot request body. So this is basically a system generated parameter called request body that is available because we are testing using an API. I'm going to say dot documents name. The field has to match the whatever we call it in Postman. So document name, I'm going to go ahead and save this and deploy. So when we deploy functions, it automatically propagates to all the deployed instances. So in this case, our API does not need to be redeployed. It was automatically redeployed. I'm going to click that. And as you can see, I get one result with our our document that matches the document name. Okay, so that's it for this video on how to query in-house sign documents programmatically. You can have fun, build out amazing use cases. See you in the next one.